Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a little experiment.
Okay.
If I say the word dopamine, what's the very first image that pops into your head?
For most people, I'd say it's probably a thumbs up on social media.
Yep.
Or, a chocolate bar.
The ding of a text message.
That little hit.
Right. We have been so conditioned by, pop psychology and all these tech articles to see dopamine as the happy hormone.
The pleasure molecule.
The pleasure molecule, the reward. And if you're feeling unmotivated, you just need a dopamine detox. We treat it like it's this one little switch in our brain that just makes us feel good.
Which is a lovely narrative. It's simple, but it's essentially a fairy tale.
Or just a tiny piece of the story.
At the very least, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like looking at a skyscraper and only describing the front door.
That is exactly what I felt when I started digging into the stack of research you sent over. I mean, we were talking about government health studies, papers from the PMC, really deep physiological reviews on renal function, and this is the one, diabetes. And I have to be honest, when I saw dopamine and kidney function in the same sentence, I really thought I had downloaded the wrong file.
It's jarring, isn't it? Doesn't compute at first.
It is. But that's the mission for today, right? To completely reframe what this molecule actually is, we are going to find out that dopamine is a master regulator of your metabolism. It's controlling your blood pressure, and this is the part I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It is intimately, almost terrifyingly, linked to type 2 diabetes and neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's.
This is the golden thread. It's the thing that ties all of those seemingly separate conditions together.
So if you're listening and you think dopamine is just about feeling good, you are missing this massive part of the story. It might be the reason your blood pressure is high or, why your blood sugar is completely out of whack.
Precisely. We need to stop thinking of dopamine as just a mood chemical and start seeing it for what it is. It's a survival communicator. It's a systemic molecule that keeps the entire machine, the whole body, running.
Okay, so before we get into the really crazy stuff, like dopamine being made in the pancreas, which still sounds fake to me, but I know it isn't, we need to ground ourselves. We need a dopamine 101 that goes way beyond the buzzwords. What actually is this stuff?
Okay, so chemically, it's a catecholamine. The formula is C8H11NO2. But, that doesn't really tell you much.
No, not really.
What really matters is where it comes from. You have to think of it as a product of a specific supply chain in the body. It all starts with an amino acid called tyrosine.
Tyrosine. Okay, that's in food, right? I'm thinking turkey, cheese, soybeans.
Exactly. High-protein foods. It's the raw material.
So here's my first skeptical question then. If I sit down and eat a giant block of cheddar cheese, am I just flooding my brain with dopamine?
I wish. I really wish it were that simple. You'd have a lot of very happy people at wine and cheese nights.
Right.
But no. So tyrosine itself can cross the blood-brain barrier. The raw material can get into the factory. But dopamine itself cannot. It's too big. So your brain has to manufacture its own supply right on site. It takes that tyrosine, uses an enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase to turn it into something called LDOPA.
LDOPA. I've heard of that. That's used as a medicine, isn't it?
It is, and we'll get to why. But then another enzyme comes along and turns that LDOPA into dopamine. It's a factory line.
Okay.
And just like any factory, if the enzymes are on strike, or if you run out of raw materials, the production just stops.
Okay, so the brain makes its own.
Yeah.
And in the brain, it's not just one big pool of happiness juice sloshing around. The research you sent outlines 4 very specific superhighways.
We call them dopaminergic pathways.
Oh.
And they are distinct, critically distinct. They do not all do the same things.
Let's walk through these, because I think this is what really explains why the happy hormone label is just so lazy.
Okay, so the first one is the nigrostriatal pathway. This is the heavy lifter. And it has pretty much nothing to do with how you feel emotionally. It controls voluntary movement.
Movement? You mean like walking or picking things up?
Picking up a coffee cup.
Yeah.
Initiating a step, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
When this pathway degrades, you don't get sad, you get rigid, you get stuck. This is the pathway that dies in Parkinson's disease.
Wow. So you could be the happiest person in the world emotionally, but if this one dopamine highway is broken, you literally can't move your hand to scratch your nose.
That's exactly it.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have the mesolimbic pathway. Now, this one is the celebrity. This is the reward pathway we always hear about.
The one that gets all the press.
It connects the emotional center of the brain to a spot called the nucleus accumbens. When you eat sugar, when you get a notification on your phone, this is the pathway that lights up. But it's not just pleasure. A better word is salience. It tells your brain, hey, pay attention. This is important. Do it again.
That's a really key distinction. So it's not just I like this, it's more like I want this.
Yes. It is the engine of craving,
Ah.
of motivation, of seeking.
Okay. What's number 3?
Then there's a mesocortical pathway. This one projects to the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain. This is what regulates things like working memory, focus, decision-making, executive function.
So if I have brain fog or I just can't pay attention to save my life, it might not be a willpower issue. It could be a dopamine issue in this specific highway.
Very often, yes. And finally, number 4 is the tuberoinfundibular pathway.
Bless you.
It's a mouthful, I know. This one is very different. It connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and its main job is to inhibit prolactin secretion.
Prolactin. That's for milk production.
Milk production, regulating the immune system, all sorts of things. Dopamine is the brake. It's the signal that tells the body, okay, stop producing milk. We don't need it now.
So just in the brain, we have movement, craving, focus, and hormonal control. 4 totally different jobs.
And that's just in the brain.
Right. And this is where we pivot, because the stack of papers you sent me has this section on peripheral existence. And there's a term in here that really confused me, sulfoconjugated. It says most of the dopamine in our blood is sulfoconjugated. What on earth does that mean?
This is such a crucial point. So in the brain, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It needs to be fast and nimble. It jumps across a tiny gap, a synapse, to fire a signal to the next neuron.
Okay.
But in the body, if dopamine just floated around freely like that, it would be total chaos. It would be messing with your heart rate, your blood pressure, constantly. So the body does something clever. It attaches a sulfate molecule to it.
He puts a little handcuff on it.
It's sort of like that. It stabilizes it, makes it less reactive. But it also changes how it works. In the body, dopamine often acts in what we call a paracrine or autocrine fashion.
Okay, you got to give me the non-textbook definition of that.
All right. Think of a hormone like adrenaline as a radio broadcast. The tower sends out a signal, and every radio in the city can hear it. The heart, the lungs, the muscles, they all react at once. That's an endocrine response, a global message.
Okay, makes sense.
Peripheral dopamine is more like a whisper, or maybe a handwritten note passed between 2 colleagues sitting at the same desk. It is produced by one cell, say, a cell in your kidney. It only affects that same cell, or the one right next to it.
So it doesn't travel to the brain, it doesn't travel down to your foot, it works locally.
Exactly. It's a local memo, not a company-wide broadcast.
That makes so much sense. That's why we don't feel high or motivated when our kidneys are just doing their job.
Precisely. It's doing quiet blue-collar work in the background, keeping the lights on.
Let's talk about that work. Because the biggest surprise for me, the biggest shock, was the pancreas. I always thought the pancreas had one job, make insulin. But apparently it's also a dopamine factory.
It is. A mini factory, but a very important one. The pancreatic islets, and specifically the beta cells that make the insulin, they have all the machinery they need to make their own dopamine. They can take up LDOPA from the blood and synthesize it right there on site.
But why? I mean, what is a mood chemical doing in a sugar-regulating organ?
It's acting as a brake. This is what we can call the pancreatic surprise. Dopamine actually inhibits insulin secretion.
Wait, stop there. That just broke my brain a little bit.
Sure.
Insulin lowers blood sugar. If I eat a bagel, my sugar goes up. I need insulin to bring it down. If dopamine stops insulin, wouldn't that make my blood sugar spike even higher? That sounds like a really bad thing.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, right? It seems like it's working against you. But biology is all about rhythm and balance. You don't want insulin flooding your system 24/7. That leads to hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar, which can actually kill you much faster than high blood sugar.
So you need a control mechanism, a governor on the engine.
You need a negative feedback loop. Dopamine provides that. It's the stop sign that prevents the pancreas from just dumping the entire truckload of insulin all at once. It fine-tunes the response.
Okay. And there was a specific mechanism you highlighted in the paper, something called the anti-incretin effect. Sounds complicated.
It's fascinating, actually. So when you eat, your gut releases these hormones called incretins, or like messengers. They rush to the pancreas and shout, hey, food is coming, release the insulin now. That causes a big surge.
That's the normal response.
That's the normal response.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the absorption of glucose in your gut also stimulates the production of dopamine right there in the intestines.
So the food itself triggers both the go signal, which is the incretins, and the slow down signal, the dopamine, at the same time.
Exactly. It's constantly balancing the scales to make sure the insulin spike is appropriate for the meal, not excessive. It's an incredibly elegant system.
Okay, so that's how it works in a healthy person. But this brings us to the paradox, the diabetes paradox. Because in type 2 diabetes, we know the system is broken.
Right. Very broken.
So if dopamine is a brake on insulin and people with diabetes already have trouble with insulin, you'd think they would want less dopamine. You'd think the last thing you'd want to do is hit the brakes harder.
Logically, yes. You'd
Yeah.
want to cut the brake lines.
Right. But the research says we treat diabetes with a drug called bromocriptine, which is a dopamine agonist. It mimics dopamine. It pushes the brake pedal. Why?
It's a massive paradox.
Yeah.
And it really confused scientists for a very long time. Why on earth would you give a diabetic a drug that, at least locally in the pancreas, suppresses insulin?
So what's the answer?
The answer is that we have to zoom out. We have to stop looking just at the pancreas and look at the brain again. The main effect of bromocriptine isn't about the pancreas. It's about the clock.
The circadian rhythm.
The master clock in the hypothalamus, yes. In healthy people, there's a natural surge of dopaminergic activity in the brain early in the morning. It's like a metabolic wake-up call. It tells the body, okay, nighttime is over. Stop burning so many fat. Get ready for incoming fuel. Let's reset insulin sensitivity for the day.
It's like the morning reboot for your whole system.
It's the master reboot. But in people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, that morning dopamine surge is missing. It's blunted, it's weak, or it's not there at all.
So their metabolic clock is just stuck, blinking 12.00 like an old VCR.
That's a perfect analogy. And because that crucial dopamine signal is missing, the brain kind of panics. It thinks it's under constant stress. It keeps the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, revved up all the time.
And that would raise blood sugar.
It keeps blood sugar high, and it keeps free fatty acids pumping into the blood, even when you haven't eaten a thing. This is a huge reason why many diabetics wake up with surprisingly high blood sugar.
The dawn phenomenon.
That's it. So when we give bromocriptine, we aren't just targeting the pancreas. We are timing it. We give it in the morning to mimic that natural surge in the brain. We are artificially resetting the clock.
So the drug basically tricks the brain into thinking the rhythm is normal.
Exactly. The brain sees that dopamine signal. It says, oh, okay, the boss is awake. We're good. We can turn off the fight or flight alarm. And suddenly, as a downstream effect, insulin sensitivity improves across the whole body. The liver calms down, the muscles listen better. It's remarkable.
That is wild. You're fixing the conductor so the whole orchestra can play in time.
That's the idea.
There was one other thing about the pancreas in the notes, this idea of cellular cleanup. It mentioned an enzyme, MAO. This sounded like a waste management issue.
It is, basically. MAO, or monoamine oxidase, is an enzyme whose job is to break down dopamine after it's been used. You can't just leave it lying around, so you need to make it, use it, and then clear it out. If that clearing process is broken, or if you just can't make enough dopamine to begin with, the beta cells get incredibly stressed.
And when they get stressed out.
Apoptosis. They start to die off.
Yeah.
This is the real tragedy of type 2 diabetes. It's not just that the cells are lazy. It's that they are overworked, exhausted, and living in a toxic environment. Dopamine seems to act as a protective antioxidant for them. It shields them from that stress.
So without that local dopamine signal, the insulin factory literally starts to run down.
Yes, it's like a protective coolant for the engine, and when it runs out, the engine overheats and seizes.
Okay, let's move down the body. We've done the brain, we've done the pancreas. Now the kidneys, the kidney connection. This section mentions a word I had to look up. Natriuresis.
It's a fancy word for peeing out salt.
I just assumed salt came out naturally,
Yeah.
via osmosis or something simple.
It does, but the rate at which it happens is very, very tightly controlled, and dopamine is one of the gatekeepers. When dopamine binds to specific receptors in the kidney, the D1 and D5 receptors, it actively inhibits the reabsorption of sodium. It basically tells the kidney, don't hang on to this salt, let it go.
And where salt goes, water follow.
Always. So you pee out more salt, you pee out more water, your blood volume goes down, and your blood pressure drops.
Okay, let's connect this to the hypertension epidemic. We're always told don't eat so much salt, but some people can eat a ton of salt and they're fine. Other people look at a potato chip and their blood pressure spikes.
That's salt sensitivity. And a growing body of research suggests that for many of these people, the problem isn't just the salt itself. It's a defect in their renal dopamine system.
The signal isn't getting through. The message is lost.
It's like the kidney has sent the dump the salt email directly to the spam folder. The body makes the dopamine, but the receptor, specifically the D1 receptor, doesn't answer the phone. So the kidney just keeps holding on to salt, holding on to water, and your blood pressure skyrockets.
That completely reframes the whole disease. It's not just a dietary failure, it's a signaling failure.
It is. And it's often genetic. The notes mention the D4 receptor. There are known variations, polymorphisms, in this gene. If you happen to have the long repeat version of this particular gene, you are statistically much more likely to have high blood pressure.
It's literally written in your code?
In some cases, yes. And we're also just now learning about a new player in all this called renalase.
Sounds like an enzyme from the kidney.
It is. It was only discovered relatively recently. It's an enzyme secreted by the kidney specifically to metabolize, to chew up catecholamines like dopamine and adrenaline in the blood. If your renalase levels are off, your entire blood pressure regulation system goes out the window.
And this, of course, ties back to diabetes again.
Inextricably. We call it diabetic nephropathy kidney disease caused by diabetes. We used to think it was just the high sugar physically damaging and rotting the kidneys. But now we see that in diabetes, the intrarenal dopamine, the local dopamine inside the kidney, that system fails.
So the protective mechanism is just gone.
Right. Dopamine normally helps protect the glomerulus, the kidney's delicate filtering unit. When that protection is lifted because the dopamine signaling is broken, the filter gets damaged much more easily.
This is unbelievable. So if you're diabetic, you can lose the dopamine signal in the brain, which messes up your circadian clock. You lose it in the pancreas, which stresses your insulin-producing cells, and you lose it in the kidneys, which raises your blood pressure. It's a total systemic collapse.
A dopaminergic failure point. That is a perfect way to describe it. It's a cascade.
Let's talk about the eyes, because this part felt very sci-fi to me. The outline mentions volume transmission in the retina.
The eye is fascinating. It's basically a piece of the brain that sticks out of your skull, so it's highly neural tissue. In the retina, dopamine is a key regulator of how we adapt to light, going from a dark room to bright sunlight.
So when I walk out of a dark movie theater and I'm completely blinded for a minute, dopamine is what helps my eyes adjust?
Yes. It helps modulate the photoreceptors. But here's the critical link. In diabetes, retinal dopamine levels drop. And they drop very, very early in the disease process, often before you would notice any vision loss. Before a doctor might even see damage.
It's the canary in the coal mine.
It really is. And the consequences of that drop are severe. The lack of dopamine contributes to the formation of what are called ghost vessels.
That is a terrifying term. What is a ghost vessel?
It's a capillary, a tiny blood vessel in the retina, where the cells that make up its walls have died, leaving behind just an empty tube, a ghost. This is the very beginning of diabetic retinopathy, which is a leading cause of blindness.
And the sources say that treating with L-DOPA, the dopamine precursor, that actually helped.
In animal models, yes, it was remarkable. Restoring the dopamine levels saved those vessels from dying. It suggests that dopamine is almost like a neurotrophic factor, a nutrient for these specific neural tissues. Without it, they just wither away.
And do we see the same kind of vulnerability in the heart?
Yes, absolutely. It's part of a condition called autonomic neuropathy. This is when the automatic nervous system that controls your heart rate and rhythm gets glitchy. Diabetics often have very poor heart rate variability. Their heart can't ramp up or calm down smoothly and efficiently.
Because that dopamine buffer is missing.
That seems to be a big part of it. But I have to insert a safety warning here. It's in the notes, and it's really important. We can't just throw any dopamine drug at the heart and hope for the best.
Why not? What's the risk?
It all comes down to the receptors. Some of the older dopamine agonists are what we call ergot-derived. They originally come from a fungus. These particular drugs were found to cause fibrosis in the heart valves.
Fibrosis? You mean like scar tissue?
Exactly. It makes the heart valves thick and stiff so they can't close properly. So you might fix the blood sugar, but you cause heart failure in the process. Modern drugs are non-ergot, so they're much safer. But it highlights how incredibly specific we have to be. You can't just turn the dopamine knob up on the whole body without some serious potential consequences.
It's a very delicate balancing act. Okay, this next section is the one that really it hit me the hardest. The deadly intersection. We are now linking type 2 diabetes directly to Parkinson's disease.
This is the topic that keeps a lot of neuroscientists and endocrinologists up at night.
The statistic in the paper was just so blunt. Having type 2 diabetes significantly increases your risk of developing Parkinson's. And if you have both, the progression of the disease is much faster.
Much, much faster.
But why? I mean, one feels like a sugar problem, the other feels like a shaking problem in the brain. What is the bridge between them?
The bridge is energy and inflammation. We're seriously starting to refer to neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and even Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes.
Diabetes of the brain.
Exactly. Think about it. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes something like 20% of your total energy. It's a gas guzzler. If you have insulin resistance in your muscles and your liver, you almost certainly have it in your brain too.
Insulin gets into the brain.
Oh yeah. Insulin crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's a vital signal for neurons to take up and use fuel.
So if the brain becomes insulin resistant, the neurons are literally starving.
They're starving in a sea of 20. The glucose is there in the blood, but they can't get it inside to use it. This leads directly to mitochondrial dysfunction. The little power plants in the cells start to sputter and fail. And when mitochondria fail, you get a huge plume of oxidative stress, and you get protein clumping.
Alpha-synuclein.
That's the villain in this story. Alpha-synuclein is the specific protein that clumps together to form what are called Lewy bodies, and these are the toxic aggregates that kill the dopamine neurons in Parkinson's. But here's the absolute kicker.
Yep.
Alpha-synuclein isn't just a junk protein, it's also a regulator of insulin secretion in the pancreas.
No way. It's a loop.
It's a vicious feedback loop. High blood sugar makes alpha-synuclein clump together faster in the brain. And the clumps of alpha-synuclein then interfere with insulin signaling in both the brain and the body. So diabetes directly accelerates Parkinson's pathology, and Parkinson's pathology can worsen metabolic dysfunction.
That is just terrifying. But there's a silver lining here, right? A ray of hope. The magic drugs. We hear about Ozempic, Wegovy, the GLP-1 agonists. Everyone's talking about them for weight loss. But the research says they might actually be neuroprotective.
This is probably the most exciting frontier in neurology right now. Drugs like exenatide and liraglutide, they were designed for diabetes.
Yeah.
But because they can cross the blood-brain barrier, they have these profound effects on the brain's metabolism.
What are they actually doing in there?
A few things. They seem to reduce neuroinflammation. They turn down the heat, so to speak.
Yeah.
They promote neurogenesis, the actual growth of new neurons. And crucially, they appear to improve dopamine synthesis and protect existing dopamine neurons from dying.
So you take a diabetes drug, and it could protect your brain from Parkinson's.
That's the hypothesis. And the data is starting to back it up. In actual clinical trials, patients with Parkinson's who took exenatide showed real measurable improvements in their motor symptoms. Not just their blood sugar got better, but their movement and tremors got better.
That is absolutely incredible. It's like putting brain armor on.
It really is. It's a strategy that treats the underlying metabolic failure that seems to be driving the degeneration in the first place.
And it's not just Parkinson's. The outline also mentions Huntington's disease. Now, that one is purely genetic, though. You're born with that mutation.
You are. It's a mutation in the Huntington gene. It's a guaranteed outcome. But even there, your metabolic health can dictate the severity and speed of progression. The mutant Huntington protein itself impairs insulin synthesis. And get this, metformin, the $4 generic diabetes pill, has been shown to improve motor outcomes in mouse models of Huntington's.
It feels like we've been categorizing these diseases all wrong. We put them in these neat little boxes. This is an endocrine disease, this is a neurological disease, but they're all just metabolic health issues at their core.
You absolutely cannot separate the brain from the body. If the engine metabolism is broken, the brain won't turn properly. It's that simple.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most relatable piece of this puzzle, behavior. Because if dopamine drives metabolism and metabolism drives brain health, what drives the choices we make every day? Let's talk about ADHD and obesity.
This is a classic chicken or the egg situation, but the link is just undeniable. Having ADHD is a massive risk factor for developing obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Is that just because of impulsivity, making poor food choices?
That's part of it for sure, but goes deeper than that. The prevailing theory is something called reward deficiency syndrome.
I love that term. Explain it.
Okay, imagine your brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens, in a bucket. In a neurotypical person, that bucket is maybe half full most of the time. You see a beautiful sunset, or you finish a task at work and you get a little splash of dopamine and the bucket fills up. You feel good.
You feel satisfied.
Right. But in someone with ADHD or someone with specific variants of the D2 dopamine receptor, the bucket has a hole in it, or it's just almost empty to start with. The baseline is lower.
So you're chronically understimulated. You're bored.
You're chemically bored. So you spend your life you seek out stimulation to try and fill that
Mm.
bucket. And in our modern world, what is the fastest, cheapest, most potent, and most socially acceptable dopamine hit available?
Sugar, fat, salt, hyperpalatable processed food.
Exactly. It's not that people with ADHD lack willpower. It's that their brain is screaming for dopamine. And a donut provides a more efficient chemical solution than, say, going for a run. It's a form of unconscious self-medication.
That makes so much sense, and it explains why traditional dieting is so incredibly hard for people with this neurochemistry. You're literally fighting your own brain's survival instincts.
You are. And there's a maternal link here, too, which is fascinating. The research shows that children born to mothers who had gestational diabetes during pregnancy are significantly more likely to develop ADHD.
Wow. So the metabolic environment in the womb might actually program the dopamine system of the developing child.
It seems so. A constant bath of high sugar in utero might fry or downregulate the developing reward circuits, essentially setting that child up for reward deficiency later in life.
That is profound. It's a generational cycle of metabolic and mental health.
It completely blurs the line between what we call food addiction and drug addiction.
I wanted to ask about that. Is food addiction a real biological thing, or is that just an excuse people use for poor choices?
Mechanistically, from a neuroscience perspective, it is absolutely real. It uses the exact same pathway, that mesolimbic wanting pathway, as cocaine or nicotine or gambling. And there's a specific hormone called ghrelin that's deeply involved.
Ghrelin, that's the hunger hormone.
Right, it's secreted by your stomach when it's empty.
Yeah.
But ghrelin doesn't just make your stomach rumble. It travels up to the brain to an area called the ventral tegmental area, or VTA,
Yeah.
and it literally triggers dopamine release.
Wait a minute. So being hungry literally changes how your brain processes reward.
Yes, it times the pump, it makes food look better, smell better, and it makes the dopamine hit you get from eating it feel even more rewarding. It's the hungry brain hijacking your decision-making apparatus.
And this brings us right back to those GLP-1 drugs. We know they kill appetite, but now there are all these reports of them killing other cravings, other addictions.
This is the side effect that turned out to be a potential miracle. People on Ozempic or Wegovy started reporting that they didn't just stop craving burgers. They stopped craving wine. They lost interest in smoking. They stopped biting their fingernails. Some even reported they stopped their compulsive online shopping.
Because the drug is somehow patching the hole in that bucket.
That's a great way to put it. The GLP-1 agonists seem to dampen the dopamine firing in the reward center. They take the high out of the rewarding behavior. If alcohol doesn't give you that buzz anymore, you just stop drinking it. The motivation is gone.
That could change everything for addiction treatment. We could be treating alcoholism with diabetes drugs.
It's very, very likely where the field is heading. The potential is enormous.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground. I want to spend our last few minutes on the so what, the therapeutic implications. If I'm listening to this and I'm worried about my brain health or my blood sugar, what does the research say about some of the drugs that are already out there? We mentioned metformin.
Metformin is fascinating. It's the most prescribed diabetes drug in the world for a reason. Its main job is to activate something called AMPK, which is a master energy sensor in our cells. It basically mimics the effects of fasting. It helps the cells clean themselves up.
So it's good for longevity, good for overall health?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
But, and this is a big but that was highlighted in the sources, high doses or long-term use can be risky for the brain.
How so? What's the mechanism?
Metformin is known to block the absorption of vitamin B12 in the gut.
And we need B12 for
Yeah.
nerves.
Right. For the myelin sheath, the insulation that protects our nerves, a severe B12 deficiency can look almost exactly like dementia. It causes neuropathy, memory loss, brain fog, confusion. It's serious.
So if you're taking metformin for your diabetes, you would better be checking your B12 levels and probably supplementing.
Absolutely. I would say supplementation is non-negotiable for anyone on long-term metformin.
Okay. What about the SGLT2 inhibitors, the drugs that end in glyphosate?
All right, the gliflozins. So these are the drugs that work by making you pee out excess sugar. Dapagliflozin, empagliflozin. They're incredibly effective for protecting the heart and kidneys, especially in diabetics. But the research is showing they also reduce oxidative stress in the brain. They seem to induce a state of mild ketosis, which the brain likes, and they promote autophagy.
Autophagy, the self-eating.
It sounds gross, but it's a wonderful process.
Yeah.
It's your cells taking out the trash. They're clearing out the damaged mitochondria and the misfolded proteins, like alpha-synuclein.
So by dumping sugar out through the kidneys, you're indirectly triggering a cleanup crew in the brain.
Exactly. Again, it's all connected.
And finally, what about pioglitazone? This is an older drug, I think.
It is. It's a PPAR gamma agonist. It's known to be a very potent anti-inflammatory agent, and it has shown some real promise in reducing stroke risk. But for Parkinson's specifically, the results in humans have been pretty mixed.
It works in animals, but not people.
It works well in animal models, but the human clinical trials have been inconsistent.
Why the disconnect?
It might be a question of timing. Once the dopamine neurons are dead, they're dead. You can't really bring them back. These metabolic treatments might need to be started years or even decades before the first tremor ever starts.
Which means we need to get better at treating the pre-Parkinson's state, which might just be another name for insulin resistance.
Exactly. Treat the metabolism today to save the brain tomorrow.
This has been a mind-bending hour. I mean, we started with the happy hormone, a simple reward chemical, and we've ended up with a molecule that acts as a salt regulator in the kidneys, an insulin brake in the pancreas, a light adjuster in the eye, and the fundamental bridge between blood sugar and neurodegeneration.
It really forces you to completely abandon the idea of mental health versus physical health. They aren't separate things.
Right. We have psychiatrists for what happens above the neck and endocrinologists for what happens below, but if dopamine is running the show in both places.
And the distinction is completely artificial. It's one system.
I want to leave the listener with one final thought, a bit of a philosophical question based on everything we've just discussed. We talked about the gut-brain talk. We talked about how hormones like ghrelin and signals like insulin can dictate our dopamine levels, our cravings.
Yes.
So if my cravings, my focus, my willpower, and maybe even my core personality, my drive, my ambition, are being dictated by the sensitivity of my insulin receptors and the health of my kidneys, do I actually have free will? Or am I just the sum of my metabolic processes?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Are we the driver, or are we just the passenger in a very complex chemical car?
Something to think about next time you reach for that snack. Is it you that wants it? Or is it the hole in the bucket? Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay curious.
Stay curious.